This podcast ponders how we will live in this COVID era.
What's on the horizon?
What should we expect?
Where are the opportunities? We explore the what's next in the next normal.
Lisa Taylor, president of Challenge Factory.
The reason every decision we go to make is so difficult is because it's laden with moral hazard. We can't actually judge what's good and bad.
Dave Hardy, president of Hardy Stevenson and Associates.
COVID has really pushed us to think about what healthy cities mean.
Sarah Thorne, president and CEO at Decision Partners.
We've really acknowledged the recognition and the safety and the caring for each other because we've adopted these new behaviors.
Ujwal Arkulgud, chief anthropologist and CEO at MotiveBase.
And this is not just because of the pandemic, this is because a lot of us have gained new knowledge.
Hello, I'm Erin Trafford.
I'm Dave Trafford.
And this is The Next Normal. Today we are talking about, we're pulling a thread from the last episode about innovation. And what we get into today is this big conversation about technology and how, is it a chicken or egg? Do we inform the technology or does the technology inform us and how we innovate? It's a really interesting conversation that is quite nuanced coming out of the pandemic.
Well, and one of the things that we've learned out of the pandemic is that I think, and it was certainly punctuated recently when we saw reports suggesting that Canadian cities, for example, fell off the cliff as far as being considered some of the most innovative centers in the world. And they were up there in the top 10 for a long time. Then, I think Vancouver and Calgary fell right off the top 100. Why is that? What is it about innovation? I'm not just thinking Canadian, but all of a sudden where we think we're innovative, maybe we don't understand innovation. Maybe we really don't understand how it's applied. And back to the last one when we were talking about skills, it's a skill we need to develop generally. Is technology the best way to do that? We always marry the two. It's technology and innovation. Is it always, or does it have to be? So I think that, we're going to have to kind of look at that through another lens. And one of the things that comes up more often than not is innovation and artificial intelligence. And that is going to be what we need to get to on the horizon. Is that the answer? Dave Hardy at Hardy Stevenson and Associates is going to lead us through that conversation this morning.
Yeah, the AI conversation is really interesting, especially when you look at it through the lens of things like accessibility and sustainable technologies and what it actually means. Like, is AI that kind of terrifying, robotic, computers are going to take over the world kind of force? Or is it something else that we can start to use to be more innovative and really solve some of the big problems that we're going to be facing or that we're facing right now that are right in front of us and that were really, really brought to light over the last year?
So, let's dive a little bit more deeply on some of this stuff, because I think the technology, the innovation, this whole new way of looking at the economy from an opportunity perspective, Dave Hardy, I think that's got to be our lens right now.
Yes, Dave, and I'm thinking maybe I should start off with a warning for our listeners that I'm going to say that the next normal is going to be a world that's never been better. And I'm going to use the example of the last pandemic and what that did in terms of improving the world. And it was the polio epidemic, and it's taken 75 years to almost eliminate the virus with the help of the World Health Organization, the Gates Foundation, and the Rotary International Foundation. Now, the virus still exists in parts of Pakistan and Afghanistan, but in the process of wiping out polio, we left behind community health care around the world in the poorest parts of the world. So at least there's rudimentary health care. And we've seen, as a result, a significant drop in infant mortality and a significant increase in maternal health. So COVID is pushing us to improve health once again. And when we add global cooperation to reduce poverty, if you remember back in the year 2000, we had the Millennial Development Goals. Well, those were achieved in terms of countries getting together and doing their best to, can't say eliminate poverty, but bring people up to a much better place than they were. we're able to feed ourselves now more than any time in history as crop yields are increasing. And through China and so on, infrastructure is going to the third world, helping to assist them to move into a less poor situation. We're seeing a leveling off of the global population levels. Now, when we move from the COVID push to the technology pull, I think it gets better. If you have a cell phone or an iPad anywhere on the face of the planet, you can get a first world education, access to a doctor, and you're able to run a global business. So I feel that the world will continue to improve even more, particularly as we're seeing the revolution occur in physics and quantum computing and bioscience. So with the increase in technology, the computing power is about to help us with a big leap in our quality of life. Driverless cars, Internet of Things, the CRISPR genetic programs are able to sort through these viruses in no other time in history. That's why we were able to get cures for COVID as fast as we could. So I'm also excited, and I'll close with saying I'm excited about the future of smart cities. We'll have cities with lower energy consumption. We'll be able to educate people about better in terms of how to sustain our natural environment. We'll even be able to create smart streets that do their own snow plowing. So I'm optimistic that the next normal will be a very positive world.
Yeah, I guess, Ujwal, we get into that whole, your world around AI very quickly based on what Dave's talking about. And I can see how, the smart city model is really fascinating to me, and I think that there's great opportunity there for public health and all kinds of efficiencies around the environment. But at the same time, and you will know this better than anybody else, you start to talk about, AI, and people think, you're going to take my job. I'm behind the 8 ball. This is a negative. It's a dark cloud. You think the pandemic was bad. AI is going to be the big boogeyman of the future.
It's a real fear at the moment, and in particular, a real fear for those, once again, who are older, who are less privileged. So I think it's the common thread that runs through most of these topics that relate to technology. The one amazing thing coming out of the pandemic is, and we're seeing this in our own industry, because AI is such a buzzword and has been for a while now. But through the pandemic, there's been a couple of shifts. First, a recognition that AI can be a companion application to the human being. And what I mean by that is it's not meant to replace, because guess what? It's not really that intelligent. It's artificial. It's really not that intelligent. And we're certainly nowhere. I forget who I was reading recently, but there was a quote about how we're at least 50 to 100 years away from true intelligence from anything artificial. So that term is a bit of a mischaracterization of what technology can do. So there's a greater recognition and slowly evolving knowledge that, hey, this thing can be a companion. So what does that mean? It means it can allow us to do things better. It can allow us to use our brains better. It can allow us to maybe cut some of the menial tasks that we don't like doing in our jobs and instead focus on some of the more value-added tasks where our brains are more actively utilized. And certainly we apply that philosophy in our company as well. Our anthropologists, they don't do any of the data collection. They don't produce a report. They do the analysis. They click a button, the AI produces the report. The AI does the data collection, organization, quantification, and so on. So I think that's a shift that's very interesting, and I'd love to hear what the others think about that as well.
There's a concept with technology and innovation, and having had a long technology career, I always come back to this. It's technological determinism. And what that means is just because a technology exists, we feel like we have to use it. And we have to use it right now. And I think, Ujwal, that's a little bit of what's fueling that fear about AI replacing all of the jobs. Of course, we're nowhere near the sophistication level where AI is actually going to replace all of the jobs. And if we were to take a look at the difference in the bottom line impact in companies today of demographic shifts and aging within the workforce, and AI, robotics, and technology, we'd see that the demographic shift is having a much bigger impact on business than any technological displacement of jobs today. But we spend all of our time talking about the technology and what's going to happen with AI. And that's because we have this sense that now that it exists, we have to use it right away. So not only is it not ready to be used, we don't have to use it right away. This is where our own humanity and our own desire for what we want to see for our own societies really needs to kick in. How do we want to use it? What cities do we want to have in the future? How does technology help us achieve that vision and goal? It's really got to start. Innovation doesn't start at the technical level. It starts with the vision of what we're trying to accomplish, and then all of the tools that we have, human and technological, in order to accomplish that. And so when we look at what's going to happen in the future, I'm like Dave, I'm very optimistic. And we need to get out of focusing on what's sexy or what's the easiest thing to grab onto and actually think about, what do we want for our future, and how can we use these technologies to help us achieve those goals?
Yeah, I think that's really an astute comment. I think that, if I go back to Dave's comment about smart cities, smart communities, I think we really need to have a dialogue with all sectors of society, because we're all stakeholders in the future. Building on what Lisa said, think about, what is that future? What do we want to be? What do we want to have? How can we be more inclusive? And where can we use technology, including AI, to help us get there? I think it's really about, the future is really about coming together and figuring out what our shared values are and what we want to co-create going forward. Not looking at AI and other tools as, bright, shiny objects, but rather thinking about them as enabling tools.
I'd like to expand on that, Sarah, particularly on engaging people around AI and big data. We need to give it direction as well. I know big data often gathers information, sometimes just to see what's there. But what it doesn't do is say, take a look at what youth at risk programs have been successful in cities around the world and why. So to me, that's giving direction to big data and AI. The other thing, I think, picking up on Lisa's point earlier, that AI is good at solving complex problems when there's a simple solution. It's horrible at solving simple questions where there's a complex solution. So you can get a truck through a city very efficiently and make it smart through AI, because that's a calculable problem and it's one truck. But what you can't do is say, well, how do I solve poverty in this community? A very simple question. AI can't deal with that. So we have a lot of work to do to try to give this direction. I'm a big believer in combining the social sciences and AI, and particularly philosophy with AI, making sure that what we're doing is human benefit and also it's ethical.
I just wanted to pick up on a couple of the points that both Sarah and Dave, you both made around inclusivity. And, I think this is going to be a critical need, critical area of focus in the development of modern technology, whether it's for cities or for how we communicate with one another. And again, coming back to wanting to be positive about the future, and there are many things to be positive about. And this is one of the areas, which is that the pandemic has increased the overall level of knowledge on the issues of equity. And certainly I can see it in the entrepreneurial sector, in the startup industry in particular, where there's so much more of a focus now on inclusive design. There already was, but the pandemic has again put a spotlight on this. And I think this is an important and a positive development in the right direction.
We're about halfway through this, and I don't want to lose sight of what you all just said about technology and realizing that the human component is so important here. Ujwal, start us off. How does this change or inform our understanding of what innovation is in that context?
Yeah, great point. I'll use an example of how we think about this internally. We wanted to innovate when it came to how research was conducted and presented to large organizations. And we looked at technology as a way to push what the human mind is capable of achieving. Because we saw the gaps, the challenges that we experience as human researchers, as we saw those challenges as something that we could solve for, or we could make life easier, so to speak, in the process of doing a task, in the process of doing a job. And to us, that's why the whole notion of companion app is so critical, because technology, artificial intelligence, whatever form, machine learning, whatever form it takes, the opportunity actually is to ask the question, how can we do what we do better? How can we improve, and this is critical, how can we improve the sense of joy that we experience in doing the tasks we do? And this is something we actively think about. If you take a part of a research task, what is the part that is less enjoyable? What's the part that's more enjoyable? And how do we use technology so that we can focus on the more enjoyable portions of it? I think those are the areas that fascinate me in particular.
So it's a joyful heart that creates an environment for innovation?
It's asking the question about what is it that creates a greater level of enjoyment in the tasks that you do that opens the door to innovation in ways that it won't in the past. Because in the past, we always think about innovation as efficiency, making more money. It's all the sort of traditional metrics that we think about with innovation. Otherwise, sort of you ask anybody on the street, why do you innovate? Well, to make something faster, better, easier, cheaper, right? It's the usual answers, but that's not the reasons why we as human beings do things. Believe it or not, we don't actually do things because they're always cheaper or faster or better. We do things because there's something else behind it. There's an innate sense of joy. There's a sense of enjoyment, excitement. That's the part that I'm trying to get at with technology, because there is room for technology to actually improve that experience rather than take away from it.
So we left off the last conversation, Sarah, about talking about the need to create a culture that encourages and allows entrepreneurial skills and that spirit to flourish. Same can be said for innovation. We have, I think Lisa might have made the point earlier, we're not very good at being innovators in this country, in Canada. We, for whatever reason, we put rakes in front of ourselves, or we start the conversation with the word can't.
Well, I think one of the things that we need to do in terms of teaching innovation, fostering innovation, is to embrace risk-taking. You can't be innovative if you don't take risks. And we need to enable people, in starting with kids at a really young age, we need to let kids try things and fail and learn from what they did. That's what the whole scientific process is all about. And I think that we've put, especially the way that innovation is funded, I think that we put too many qualifications around return on investment at the end, and we haven't put enough focus on what the process is to enable people to learn, take risks, share what they've learned, move from it, move to the next step. Everything that people create doesn't work the first time, but often it gives them really great ideas about how to make things work the second or the third time. We have to constantly innovate. We have to constantly be reflective and adaptive in the kinds of work that each one of us does. That's really what the innovative process is all about. It doesn't have a fixed endpoint.
I think that focus on risk-taking and on creativity and on leaving paths open and letting people explore, as a country, we're really good at trying to put everyone into boxes and keeping people on set paths. There's ways that we understand these things. Canada in the world is number one for using what we do as the way we introduce ourselves to each other at a cocktail party. We'll exchange what we do. Other countries don't do that. In some Asian countries, they may exchange how old they are. In the United States, you're just as likely to explain what school you went to or what team you support as where you work. But we use our identity of our career as the way that we identify who we are. And we pass that down. That sense of who we are is the specific job we do. And that leaves us with very few options in terms of being really creative in where else we could go. We pass that to our children. And we do that by asking them at age 4, at age 2, at age 5, what do you want to be when you grow up? Most kids, and in fact most adults, only have a spectrum of about For children, 10 jobs that they actually can define. So if you ask a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? They have a choice of 10. They can pick one of 10 things. And then that gets reinforced in the discussions. Isn't that cute? They want to be this. We set them on a path way too early instead of asking, what problems are interesting to you? Or what do you see in your community that you think you want to be a part of in age appropriate ways? We need ways to leave the possibilities open much longer, not just for our kids, but also for ourselves. There's lots of things that we can be doing, and that is innovation as well. It's not technology, but we've defaulted to thinking innovation means technology, and it doesn't. Technology enables innovation, but it starts with risk-taking, Sarah, like you say, and creativity and seeing what we want to do to make things better for ourselves and our communities.
It reminds me of a interview that John Lennon did, and he said, when I was in school, the teacher asked me to write down on the piece of paper, what do you want to be in life? And he wrote, happy. And the teacher said, you don't understand the question. And he said, you don't understand life. Right? I think
it's true. It's a terrible question to ask young children.
Yeah. So Dave Hardy, when we look at your discipline and, everything that Lisa and Sarah have just said is we need to be flexible. We need to be aware of our surroundings, the opportunities when they present that change perhaps quickly. You're in the business of anticipating change with a long lens. I wouldn't say that you don't have an opportunity to correct mistakes, but if planners make poor decisions early, man, they get magnified down the road in ways that we might not be able to fix them.
Yeah, we're always having a 25 to 40 year perspective. That's what we're taught to think. What will the world like 25 or 40 years from now? And it just in terms of the conversation, we're an outlier firm. We're all employers. I've tried to hire the best people I can possibly find, and I challenge them right out of university. You're hired, your job today is bring the Vancouver Olympic Games to Canada. Another student, you're hired, you're going to do some work in Guyana, and I'm going to test you, and I'm going to break that mold that we're talking about. You're going to be creative, you're going to take risks, and I'm going to be behind you, and you're going to make mistakes, and I'm not going to punish you for that because that's part of the learning process. So, yeah, we we look far in the future, but we have to be creative and innovative, and as a firm, be an outlier sometimes to really make a better world for people.
I think that's going to probably lead us well into our next discussion, Ujwal, because we do want to talk about that corporate responsibility. We want to talk about the new leaders. And Dave, I think, has just, very succinctly given us a summary of what the new leaders are going to have to look like, particularly after we consider the lessons learned from COVID, that perhaps the leaders in the next generation are going to be something completely different. They're going to have different characteristics than they might have had pre-pandemic.
In particular, I want to kick off with a topic that scares everybody in the corporate world. And we've been having a lot of these conversations lately, the American caste system. So I'm excited to kick off with that.
That's what you call a tease and a promo in this business. Well done. All right, so we'll leave it there. We'll come back and we'll... I promise that we'll pivot that to something positive, but we'll start there with Ujwal and the crew right here on The Next Normal. Yeah, before we started this conversation, I never thought innovation was really at the heart of Lisa Taylor's question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, I don't know how often you have had that conversation with Piper, and I suspect Marigold, but at some point you look at it and think, yeah, you know what? That really is the beginning of it all. Why limit our thinking at such a young age? Because look at how creative your kids are, and we seem to pound it out of them. They're innovative every day.
It's so true. I was thinking about that. I did have that conversation with my 4-year-old daughter, a few weeks ago before we recorded this session. And she said, Mommy, I want to be a singer-scientist. And I thought, okay, how are we going to make this happen for you? Because that is really kind of the creative spark that we need to be innovative. We need to look at these ideas that our younger generations have and say, Not, no, you can't do that. It doesn't fit into a current box. It doesn't check a box. It's not, how we have always done things. And instead start creating an environment where we say, okay, how can we make that happen for you? Right? It's more, and I found this conversation particularly interesting because we started out talking about big ideas of technology and artificial intelligence. And really what it boils down to is creative solutions and creative thinking, and that we don't really have a way to prepare our younger generations for doing that, right? We don't seem to value it as much as the skills or the degree or the check boxes.
Yeah, well, I mean, quite frankly, they've already got it. We were all born with it. Generally speaking, we're innately musicians. We're innately curious. We're innately scientists. We're problem solvers. I mean, otherwise we'd still be lying flat on our back on the floor. We learned how to pick ourselves up and walk, not because of anything, our parents taught us. So we as adults tend to pound that out of our kids. And it's a cultural thing. I mean, imagine if we just kind of let them, I know. The response to that idea of just let the kids run free is going to be crazy for some people. But imagine if the imagination was not considered something that is barely possible.
Yeah, imagine if. And then imagine what kind of leaders we would create.
Exactly. We'd be focused on the whole idea of, wow, this is possible. Or how do we make it possible is a better question, right? So I think those are the things I took away from this whole conversation. And what is our responsibility in that? I mean, again, what's our responsibility as parents when our kids are growing up? How do we allow this to flourish? So there's all kinds of opportunity there to rethink what innovation and some technology might have to do with it. All right. Coming up, we're going to dig in a little bit more on this idea and the whole notion of our responsibility. We all want one throat to choke. Is that the best approach to it? So we'll get into that coming up in the next episode of The Next Normal.
The Next Normal is sponsored by Challenge Factory, shaping the future of work.
By Decision Partners. Our world is a better place when we make better decisions.
By Motive Base, decoding implicit meaning behind what people talk about.
And by Hardy Stevenson and Associates, planning the cities of the future.
Comments, questions, or ideas for our hosts? Feel free to drop us an email at hello@storystudionetwork.com.
This series is produced for the Story Studio Network by Eye Contact Productions.